Before his sad demise, Randolph Scott's horrible secret came out. Randolph Scott came into the world. Randolph Georgia Scott was born on January 23, 1898, in Orange County, Virginia. He was raised in a wealthy family in the South before moving to Charlotte, North Carolina, where he spent much of his childhood. Scott's dad was a textile executive, and his family gave him a good life that let him go to good schools. He went to Georgia Tech and the University of North Carolina for a short time to study engineering and business. After that, he served in World War I, where he learned the quiet confidence and discipline that would eventually define his on-screen persona. Scott came back from the war not sure what he wanted to do with his life until he met movie star Howard Greer by chance and decided to come to Hollywood. That choice changed his life forever. Scott didn't have a lot of success in Hollywood. At first, he began as an extra, often doing little roles that didn't get credit as he studied acting and got better at it. Casting directors quickly noticed him because he was tall, athletic, had classic good looks, and spoke with a dignified Southern accent. During the 1920s and early 1930s, he played a lot of supporting roles, mostly in adventure movies and dramas. Randolph Scott, on the other hand, really found his home and personality in the Western genre. His first big Western roles were in movies like The Last Roundup 1934 and The Desperado 1943, which showed that he was naturally good at the genre. He played the austere cowboy hero with realness and calm intensity. His reputation rose over the years as people liked how honest, harsh, and understated he was as an actor. Randolph Scott was one of the biggest stars of the silver screen by the end of the 1930s and into the 1940s. Scott was different from a lot of other performers who were typecast and only got to play the same kinds of roles over and over again. He wasn't just a lawman or a gunman. He was generally shown as a man with a sense of right and wrong who was sculpted by suffering and guided by justice. He worked with directors like Henry Hathaway and later Bud Boder to make some of the best westerns ever. People now think that movies like Ride Lonesome 1959, The Tall T 1957, and Comanche Station 1960 are some of the best in the genre. Scott was able to give extremely contemplative and emotionally expressive performances since these collaborations focused more on human emotion, solitude, and redemption than on gunplay. Randolph Scott's personal life, though frequently overshadowed by his lengthy and acclaimed cinematic career, exhibited a complicated mixture of romanticism, prudence, and stability that mirrored the man himself. He married Marion DuPont initially. She was a very tall and independent woman. Marion was a member of the famous DuPont family from Delaware. She was an A's, equestrian, and sportswoman who inherited the Montpelier estate in Virginia, which used to be President James Madison's house. At first glance, the marriage between Scott and DuPont in 1936 looked like a mix of Hollywood charm and old American aristocracy, a combination of glamour and elegance. Their wedding was widely reported in the society pages, and admirers of Scott, who was quickly becoming a popular Western star, were interested in the gorgeous, soft-spoken actor's relationship with the accomplished horsewoman and rider. But even though they loved and respected each other, their marriage didn't last long. Marion DuPont loved her horses and the world of horseback riding, while Scott was becoming more and more interested in the demands and routines of his Hollywood job. They were both strong and independent people who lived very different lives. She liked the serenity of Virginia's countryside, where she ran her stables and bred racehorses. He liked the bright lights of California, where his career was taking off quickly. The distance, both emotional and physical, slowly built a gap that neither of them could close. The pair was divorced in 1939 after only 3 years of marriage. People who knew them remarked that even though their marriage ended, they broke up without any public controversy or anger. Marion DuPont became one of the most important people in American horse racing, while Scott kept getting more and more famous as one of the most famous Western heroes of all time. 5 years later, in 1944, Randolph Scott met Patricia Stillman, a lady who would be by his side for the remainder of his life. People often said that Patricia was calm, graceful, and loyal. She gave Scott the impression of security and warmth that he had been looking for. Their marriage lasted more than 40 years, which is unusual in Hollywood, where famous couples regularly break up because of the stress of fame and constant attention. They developed a calm, comfortable life away from the spotlight. They first moved to Los Angeles and then to Beverly Hills. Scott was a gentleman and a quiet person, and he was very loyal to Patricia. Friends of the pair often talked about how much they loved and respected each other in their marriage. Even though he was famous, Scott respected his solitude and didn't go to many of the Hollywood parties and social gatherings that other stars did. They liked to have close friends over to their house for dinner or to go on trips together. Their home was a warm and welcoming place, with exquisite decorations that showed how much they loved art, horses, and the American West. Scott was very happy in his later years, mostly because he married Patricia, who was there for him while his work slowed down and then terminated. The marriage lasted until Scott died in 1987. Thus, Patricia Stillman was his partner and friend for life. Through the good and bad times in Hollywood, Patricia kept his memory alive after he died. She mostly stayed out of the public limelight, but she always spoke with love and pride about her husband's legacy. They were one of the few examples of lasting love and loyalty in the movie business. A bond that isn't based on flashiness but on calm love and understanding. Randolph Scott, a Hollywood great, carried a secret with him in the last years of his life that had been heavy on his heart for decades. A secret that came out just before he died. Scott was the perfect example of the tough, quiet cowboy for millions of moviegoers. He was brave, ruggedly independent, and dignified. He had been in the business for more than 30 years and was one of the most well-known faces of the Western genre, but in private, away from the dusty trails and silver screens, Scott was a very private person who kept his personal life out of the public eye, but his silence spoke a lot, and before he died, the truth he had kept buried for years started to come out. Scott once told a close friend, "People see the cowboy and think they know me. The man on the TV, though, is not the man I see in the mirror." Those remarks, which were simple but haunting, showed a lifetime of inner strife. For a long time, Hollywood studios worked hard to keep their stars' images clean. They made plots that would please audiences and fit in with the social norms of the time. For Scott, that meant living in a world of secrecy and control. He was a man who had to be a public figure but was really a private person. He acted out his life both on and off the television, and as he got older, that emotional weight just got heavier. People were often guessing about Scott's personal life in the 1930s and 1940 seconds, especially because he was such good friends with fellow actor Cary Grant. The two lived together in a fancy seaside house in Santa Monica for about 12 years, which led to speculations all throughout Hollywood. Some tabloids called them Hollywood's strangest bachelors, while others said their bond was more than just buddies. Scott never directly talked about the allegations, but his soft tone and small admissions later in life made it appear like the two men had a deep connection. Scott once observed gently, "Cary was one of the few people who really understood me. We laughed with each other. We fought. We had the same dreams." He noticed the real me in a place full of masks. The world had transformed by the 1950s. Scott had also changed. After making the strong movie Ride the High Country in 1962, he quit performing. Many commentators praised the performance as a fitting way to say goodbye to one of the great Western movie stars. But when he wasn't on television, he was dealing with years of being alone and thinking. He married Patricia Stillman in 1944 and stayed with her till he died, but most people say that their marriage was more of a friendship than a passionate romance. As he got older and his health got worse, Scott grew more thoughtful and often thought about the decisions he had made and the feelings he had kept hidden for a long time. During these last few years, his closest friends and family started to find out the truth about his hidden sadness. Scott said that he has been afraid of being judged and rejected by other people for most of his life. "When I was a kid, it was perilous to be different." He said that you learn to hide and pretend, and after a while, you start to believe the performance yourself. His voice, which was a mix of pride and sadness, hinted at how hard it had been for him to keep things secret for so long. Scott recognized that being honest about who he was may have ruined his career at its peak, because Hollywood's golden age wasn't kind to anybody who ventured outside its carefully set borders. Scott nearly completely disappeared from the public eye in the 1970s as his health got worse. Friends said he was quiet yet thoughtful, and he would spend hours looking out at the California hills he loved so dearly. He didn't talk about his past very often, but people who were close to him observed that the stress he had carried for most of his life was starting to go away. Maybe it was because the world was starting to shift. Hollywood, which had previously hushed him, was now welcoming honesty, uniqueness, and acceptance. Scott hinted at this change in his last interviews with a sad smile. He remarked, "Maybe I was born at the wrong time. but I'm delighted to see that people can be themselves. Now, I wish I could have had that chance." Randolph Scott died on March 2, 1987, at the age of 89. He left behind not only a legacy of excellent movies, but also a life narrative full of emotional struggles and quiet strength. After he died, the people who knew him best started to tell the truth that he had worked so hard to keep secret, that there was a sensitive, introspective, and really human man behind the famous cowboy. His agonizing secret was not one of scandal, but of sadness, the sadness of a man who spent his life acting like a hero while secretly wanting to be accepted. Randolph Scott's story is both an homage and a lesson today. His movies showed the idealized version of the American West, but his life showed the much more complicated realities of what it meant to live honestly at a time when doing so may cost everything. "Courage isn't just standing up to a gunman in the street," he once stated. "Sometimes it's about looking at yourself." Randolph Scott was a great hero not only because of the parts he played, but also because he handled the sorrow of a secret he could never completely convey with calm dignity until the world was ready to get it. Randolph Scott, one of Hollywood's most famous and adored Western stars, died in 1987 at the age of 89. He left behind a legacy that stood for both tough masculinity and quiet dignity. He died because of problems with his heart and lungs, which got worse as he got older. Scott died quietly in Beverly Hills, California, the same city where he had lived most of his life with the stars of Hollywood's golden age. His death signaled the end of an era and the last goodbye to one of the last real stars of the classic American Western. He was the perfect cowboy hero because of his rich voice, tall frame, and strong presence on screen. Even in his last years, many in the entertainment business still looked up to and respected him. After he died, Randolph Scott was buried in Elmwood Cemetery in Charlotte, North Carolina, where he was born and raised. His return to his Southern origins showed how humble he had always been, even if he was famous and successful. Scott thought of North Carolina as more than just his home state. It reminded him of how he was raised, the values his family instilled in him, and the work ethic that had defined how he lived and worked. His burial in Charlotte became a quiet place for loyal fans to visit and pay their respects to the man who played so many stoic heroes on cinema. The cemetery, which was shrouded by large trees and had many historic markers, was a peaceful location for a guy who had always chosen calm and privacy to the noise of celebrity.